the frozen estate. The Westbrook mansion loomed against the gray January sky like a monument to grief. Olivia Reed clutched her resume tighter as the taxi wound up the private drive, gravel crunching beneath its tires. Snow blanketed the sprawling. Grounds pristine and untouched, much like the heart of the man who owned this place, if the rumors were true. "You sure this is where you want to be dropped off, miss?" the driver asked, eyeing the imposing stone structure through the windshield. "Looks like nobody's lived here for years." Olivia smiled thinly. "Someone lives here, just not very visibly." She paid the fare and stepped out, her sensible boots sinking slightly into the fresh snow. The air bit at her cheeks as she approached, the massive oak doors, wondering if this desperate career pivot had been a mistake. 6 months ago, she'd been teaching music at Greenfield Elementary. Now, after budget cuts had eliminated her position, she was applying to be a private tutor to the son of Nathaniel Westbrook, billionaire architect, recluse, and widower. Before she could knock, the door swung open. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a perpetual frown stood in the entrance. "Ms. Reed, I'm Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper. You're precisely on time. Mr. Westbrook appreciates punctuality." She gestured Olivia inside with a stiff efficiency that suggested emotions weren't welcome here. The foyer was cavernous, all marble and mahogany, but devoid of the warmth such materials should provide. No family photos adorned the walls, no stray toys or signs of the child she'd come to teach. Instead, everything was meticulously arranged, as if the house were a model home rather than a place where people actually lived. "Mr. Westbrook will see you in his study," Mrs. Porter announced, leading Olivia through a labyrinth of hallways. "Theodore is currently with his nanny, Ms. Chambers, who will be leaving us once a suitable replacement for his education is found." "How old is Theodore?" Olivia asked, trying to gather any information about her potential student. "He turned 8 last month," Mrs. Porter replied without turning around. "Though Mr. Westbrook would prefer you not make a fuss about birthdays." "Or holidays. They're difficult times." Olivia nodded, understanding the subtext. Since Evelyn Westbrook's death 3 years ago, celebrations had likely ceased in this household. The study door was ajar, revealing a man silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked snow-covered gardens. Nathaniel Westbrook didn't turn as they entered, his attention fixed on architectural plans spread across his desk. "Mr. Westbrook, Ms. Reed is here for her interview," Mrs. Porter announced. When he finally turned, Olivia felt her breath catch. Nathaniel Westbrook was younger than she'd expected, perhaps mid-30s, with features that might have been handsome if not carved into a permanent expression of restrained anguish. Dark circles shadowed eyes that assessed her with clinical detachment. "Ms. Reed, your credentials are impressive for elementary education, though somewhat lacking for a private tutor." His voice was deep but lifeless, like everything else in this house. "I believe passion for education transcends setting, Mr. Westbrook," Olivia replied, refusing to be intimidated. "And I specialized in working with children who need alternative approaches to learning." A flicker of something, interest perhaps, crossed his face. "And what makes you think my son needs alternative approaches?" Olivia met his gaze. "I've been told Theodore hasn't spoken in nearly 3 years. That suggests standard educational methods might not be sufficient." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "My son's selective mutism is temporary. He simply needs structure and discipline. With respect, Mr. Westbrook, what he might need is someone who understands that grief doesn't follow a schedule," Olivia said softly. "Especially for children." The room fell silent. Mrs. Porter looked horrified at Olivia's directness, but Nathaniel merely studied her with newfound intensity. "Show Ms. Reed to Theodore's quarters," he finally instructed Mrs. Porter. "Let's see. If my son responds to her alternative approach." The boy's room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house, colorful but untouched, as if preserved in time. Theodore sat at a small desk, methodically arranging colored pencils in perfect rows. He didn't look up when they entered. "Theodore, this is Ms. Reed. She might be your new tutor," Mrs. Porter announced before departing. Olivia didn't approach immediately. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor, pulled out a small tin whistle from her bag, and began to play a gentle melody. The boy's hands stilled, though he kept his eyes downcast. "Music was my first language, too," Olivia said when she finished playing. "Sometimes words just aren't enough. Are they, Theodore?" For the first time, the boy looked up, his eyes, so like his father's, meeting hers with cautious curiosity. From the doorway, unnoticed by either, Nathaniel Westbrook watched, something long dormant stirring in his chest as this stranger somehow reached across the silence that had engulfed his son. For the first time in 3 years, he felt a dangerous emotion rising within him. Hope. Melting frost February arrived with relentless snowstorms that further isolated the Westbrook estate from the outside world. 2 weeks into her new position, Olivia had established a tentative routine with Theodore, or Theo, as she'd taken to calling him in her mind. He still hadn't spoken, but small victories emerged daily. A nod here, a rare smile there, and most significantly, his willingness to sit beside her at the piano in the mansion's forgotten music room. The grand piano had been shrouded in a dust cover when Olivia discovered it during her exploration of the East Wing. Mrs. Porter had pursed her lips disapprovingly when Olivia asked permission to uncover it. "That was Mrs. Westbrook's piano," the housekeeper had said. "Mr. Westbrook doesn't allow anyone to touch it." But Olivia had persisted, arguing its educational value for Theo. To everyone's surprise, Nathaniel had reluctantly agreed, though he never ventured near the music room himself. This morning, as freezing rain tapped against the windows, Olivia guided Theo's small fingers over the ivory keys. "Music is mathematics made beautiful," she explained, showing him how to play a simple C major scale. "Each note has a relationship with every other note, like a family." Theo's fingers hovered uncertainly over the keys, then pressed down with deliberate care. The pure, clean sound resonated through the room. Olivia held her breath, watching his face. For a fleeting moment, the perpetual guardedness in his expression lifted, replaced by wonder. "That's it," she encouraged softly. "Now try the next one." They were so absorbed in the impromptu lesson that neither noticed Nathaniel standing in the doorway, transfixed by the sight of his son voluntarily engaging with another person. He'd intended to inform Olivia about an upcoming business trip, but found himself unable to interrupt the fragile moment unfolding before him. As Theo tentatively played each note in the scale, Olivia gently hummed along, occasionally placing her hand over his to guide his fingers. The intimacy of the scene, so innocent yet profound, made Nathaniel feel like an intruder in his own home. He cleared his throat, and both Olivia and Theo startled. The boy immediately withdrew his hands from the piano, his momentary openness vanishing behind familiar walls. "I apologize for the interruption," Nathaniel said stiffly. "Ms. Reed, could I have a word?" In his study, with its imposing desk creating a barrier between them, Nathaniel seemed more comfortable. "I'll be traveling to Chicago for 3 days, starting tomorrow. Mrs. Porter will oversee the household, but Theodore's education remains your responsibility." Olivia nodded. "Of course. I was hoping to discuss introducing some new elements to his curriculum. He shows remarkable aptitude for—" "I hired you to provide standard education in mathematics, literature, and sciences," Nathaniel interrupted, "not to experiment with my son's psychological state." "With respect, Mr. Westbrook, education isn't just about filling a child's head with facts," Olivia countered, "especially when that child is processing trauma." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "You overstep your boundaries, Ms. Reed." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But I've seen Theo respond to music in ways he doesn't respond to anything else." "Your late wife was a musician?" The question hung in the air like frost. For a moment, Olivia thought she'd pushed too far. Evelyn was a concert pianist, Nathaniel finally said, his voice barely audible. She played Carnegie Hall twice before Theodore was born. She chose motherhood over her career, though I encouraged her to continue performing. Understanding dawned on Olivia. That's why you covered the piano. Theodore used to sit beside her while she played. After she died, he trailed off, then straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. This discussion is irrelevant to your duties. Please submit your lesson plans to me before my departure. That evening, as snow continued to fall, Olivia worked, in her quarters, a comfortable suite far larger than her previous apartment. The grandfather clock in the hallway had just struck 9 when a soft knock interrupted her concentration. Mrs. Porter stood at the door, her usual stern expression softened by uncertainty. "Ms. Reed, could you come quickly? It's Theodore." Heart racing, Olivia followed the housekeeper through the dimly lit corridors to Theo's bedroom. The boy sat upright in bed, wide-eyed and trembling, clearly in the grip of a nightmare he couldn't verbalize. "He won't let me near him," Mrs. Porter whispered. "This happens sometimes when Mr. Westbrook is away." Olivia approached the bed slowly. "Hey, Theo," she said gently. "Tough night, huh? Would you like me to play something for you?" When he gave a barely perceptible nod, she retrieved her tin whistle and played a lullaby, its haunting melody filling the cavernous bedroom. Gradually, Theo's breathing steadied. She continued playing until his eyelids grew heavy. "You're safe," she murmured as sleep finally claimed him. "I promise." From the hallway, Nathaniel watched, his departure delayed by the unexpected snowstorm. The tenderness with which this woman, practically a stranger, cared for his son awakened complicated emotions he'd buried alongside his wife. He'd built his career creating perfect spaces, yet had no idea how to repair the broken home within these walls. Later that night, unable to sleep, Olivia wandered to the kitchen for tea. She froze when she saw Nathaniel at the table, nursing. A glass of amber liquid, his travel clothes exchanged for a simple sweater that made him look suddenly achingly human. "I thought you'd left," she said, hesitating in the doorway. "Weather delayed my flight until morning." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, don't let me interrupt your midnight wandering." As Olivia prepared her tea, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. "Thank you," Nathaniel said suddenly. "For earlier, with Theodore." Olivia turned, surprised by his softened tone. "He's a remarkable child, Mr. Westbrook. He feels things deeply, like his mother." Nathaniel stared into his glass. "Sometimes, I look at him and see her so clearly it hurts." The confession, offered in the strange intimacy of the late hour, hung between them. Olivia sat across from him, cradling her teacup. "Grief transforms, but it doesn't have to destroy," she said quietly. The piano was a connection point for Theo and his mother. Severing that connection doesn't protect him from pain. It just isolates him in it. Nathaniel studied her face in the dim light. "You speak from experience." Olivia nodded, her fingers tightening around her cup. "My father, he was a violinist. After he died, his violin was the only way I could still feel connected to him." Something shifted in Nathaniel's eyes, a thawing, however temporary. "The lesson plans," he said after a long pause. "Include the music." The next morning, Olivia stood with Theo at the window, watching Nathaniel's car disappear down the snowy drive. As if sensing a shift in the house's atmosphere, Theo slipped his small hand into hers, the first time he'd initiated contact. And that simple gesture, Olivia recognized the enormity of what was happening. The frost that had encased this household for 3 years was beginning to melt. But as any architect knew, when ice melts too quickly, structures can collapse under the sudden release of pressure. and Olivia wasn't certain Nathaniel Westbrook was ready for the thaw. Discordant Notes March arrived with deceptive gentleness, melting snow revealing the first tentative crocuses pushing through the earth around the Westbrook estate. Inside, similar signs of renewal were appearing. Theo now sat willingly at the piano for an hour each day, his small fingers growing more confident across the keys. Though he remained silent, his communication expanded through nods, handwritten notes, and the occasional, precious smile. Olivia maintained meticulous documentation of his academic progress for Nathaniel, who reviewed the reports with the same intensity he applied to his architectural blueprints. Their interactions had warmed since that night in the kitchen, not quite friendly, but marked by a cautious, mutual respect. Occasionally, she would catch him watching her with Theo, an unreadable expression on his face before he would turn away, retreating back into himself. On this particular afternoon, Olivia and Theo sat in the garden, taking advantage of the unseasonable warmth. She had spread a blanket on the newly visible grass where they worked on a science project about plant life cycles. "The seeds, remember, Theo," she explained, showing him how to press tiny tomato seeds into small pots of soil. "Even though they've been dormant all winter, they know exactly what to do when the conditions are right." Theo's serious eyes studied the seeds in his palm before carefully placing them in the soil. Olivia smiled, recognizing the metaphor wasn't lost on this perceptive child. The peaceful moment shattered at the sound of tires on gravel. An unfamiliar luxury car approached, coming to a sharp stop near the garden. Theo's body tensed immediately, his hands freezing above the seedling pots. A tall, elegantly dressed woman emerged, her silver blonde hair swept into an immaculate chignon. Even from a distance, Olivia recognized the aristocratic features that Theo had inherited. Though this woman's face was hardened by something beyond grief, this had to be Evelyn's mother. "Theodore," the woman called, her voice carrying across the garden. "What on earth are you doing playing in the dirt?" Theo shrank visibly, and Olivia instinctively moved closer to him. "Hello," she called, rising to her feet. "I'm Olivia Reed, Theo's tutor. We're working on a biology lesson." The woman approached, surveying Olivia with unconcealed disapproval. "Victoria Hammond," she introduced herself without offering her hand. "Theodore's grandmother. I wasn't aware Nathaniel had hired someone new." "I've been here about 6 weeks now," Olivia replied, maintaining a pleasant smile despite the chill emanating from Victoria. "Theo has been making wonderful progress." Victoria's gaze sharpened. "Theodore?" she corrected. "My daughter never abbreviated his name. It dishonors her memory to change what she chose." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Porter appeared from the house. "Mrs. Hammond, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Mr. Westbrook is still at the office." "Clearly," Victoria replied dryly. "I decided to come early to spend time with my grandson." She turned to Theo, who had begun methodically packing away the seedling materials, his earlier enthusiasm extinguished. "Theodore, go wash up. Grandmother brought you gifts from Paris." As Theo obediently headed toward the house, Victoria fixed Olivia with a penetrating stare. "Ms. Reed, isn't it? I understand you've taken it upon yourself to reopen my daughter's music room." The accusation in her tone was unmistakable. Olivia straightened. "Music has proven helpful in Theodore's education. Mr. Westbrook approved the piano lessons." Victoria's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. "Did he indeed? How unexpected." Nathaniel could barely stand to hear music after Evelyn's accident. She studied Olivia more intently. "You're quite young for a private tutor, and quite pretty. I wonder if that factored into your hiring." Heat rushed to Olivia's cheeks. "I was hired for my qualifications, Mrs. Hammond. Nothing more." "Of course," Victoria smiled thinly. "I'm sure Nathaniel has been nothing but professional." The implication hung in the air between them as Victoria swept toward the house, leaving Olivia standing among the half-planted seedlings, suddenly feeling like an intruder. That evening, dinner was a tense affair. Victoria dominated the conversation, regaling them with stories of her European travels while pointedly reminding everyone of Evelyn's accomplishments. Theo picked at his food silently, and Nathaniel responded to his mother-in-law with tight politeness. "Theodore should come stay with me this summer," Victoria announced over dessert. "The cultural opportunities in New York would be invaluable for his development, and my pianist friend Isabella would be delighted to give him proper lessons." Olivia felt Theo stiffen beside her. "Theodore's home is here," Nathaniel replied evenly. "His education is well handled." Victoria sipped her wine. "Is it?" "He still isn't speaking, Nathaniel. 3 years of silence. Perhaps it's time to consider that your methods aren't working." "Ms. Reed has made significant progress with Theodore," Nathaniel countered, his voice tightening. "His academic development is on track." "Academic development isn't everything," Victoria said, her gaze sliding to Olivia. "Children need stability, family, not a parade of employees who will eventually move on to other positions." Olivia kept her expression neutral despite the sting. Under the table, she felt Theo's small hand seek hers, squeezing with surprising strength. Later that night, unable to sleep, Olivia wandered to the music room. The moonlight filtered through the tall windows, bathing the piano in ethereal light. She sat at the bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "You play beautifully," came Victoria's voice from the doorway, startling Olivia. "I heard you earlier this week, when you thought no one was listening." Olivia turned. "Thank you. Music has always been my refuge." Victoria entered the room, trailing her fingers along the piano's polished surface. "This was an Evelyn Westbrook original," she said, pointing to a framed score on the wall that Olivia had often admired. "She composed it the year before Theodore was born. She could have been one of the greats." "She must have been extraordinary," Olivia said softly. "She was perfect," Victoria replied, her voice hardening. "And Nathaniel is trying to erase her memory from this house, with your help." Olivia shook her head. "That's not true. We're trying to help Theo heal, not forget." "By replacing his mother?" Victoria's eyes glittered dangerously. "I've seen how he looks at you, how Nathaniel watches you both. Playing house with another woman's family won't bring you the happiness you seek, Ms. Reed." "Mrs. Hammond, I'm Theo's tutor, nothing more." "Perhaps that's all you think you are." Victoria moved closer, her perfume overwhelming in the small space between them. "But I know the signs. I watched Evelyn fall under Nathaniel's spell, too. He has a talent for making women feel special, needed, until he doesn't anymore." With that parting barb, she left Olivia alone in the moonlit room, doubt seeping into the corners of her mind where cautious hope had begun to grow. The next morning, Olivia found Nathaniel in his study, his face lined with exhaustion. "Mrs. Hammond has made it clear she believes Theodore would be better off with her," he said without preamble. Olivia's heart sank. "And what do you believe?" "I believe my son needs stability," he replied, echoing Victoria's words from dinner. "But I'm beginning to question whether I can provide that." "Theo needs his father," Olivia insisted. "He needs his home." "Even if that home is broken?" Nathaniel asked, vulnerability briefly visible in his eyes. "Victoria believes I'm failing him by keeping him here, surrounded by memories." "Memories aren't the enemy," Olivia said quietly. "Silence is. The kind that falls when we're afraid to speak Evelyn's name, to play her music, to celebrate who she was while helping Theo become who he needs to be." Nathaniel studied her face. "You've brought changes to this house, Ms. Reed. Some I wasn't prepared for." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Porter appeared at the door, her usually composed face flushed with panic. Mr. Westbrook, Theodore is gone. His bed hasn't been slept in, and Mrs. Hammond can't find him anywhere in the house." As alarm spread across Nathaniel's features, Olivia had a sudden realization. "The music room," she said. "He might be hiding in the piano bench. It's where he puts things he wants to keep safe." The three adults rushed through the corridor, but the music room stood empty, the piano bench lid raised to reveal nothing but sheet music inside. On top of the piano, however, lay a childish drawing, stick figures of a man, a boy, and a woman with curly hair like Olivia's, standing before a house with music notes floating from the windows. Nathaniel picked it up, his hand trembling slightly. "He's never drawn our family before," he murmured. "Not since—" A crash of thunder interrupted him as rain began to lash against the windows, a spring storm arriving with unexpected ferocity. And somewhere in that storm was a silent little boy who had finally found something worth running away for. Crescendo rain pounded against the windows as Nathaniel marshaled search efforts with the precision of a military commander. Mrs. Porter called the groundskeeper and security staff. Victoria frantically telephoned the police, and Olivia stood in the music room, studying Theo's drawing for clues. "He wouldn't have gone far in this weather," Nathaniel said, returning to her side, rain-soaked from an initial search of the gardens. Lightning illuminated his face, revealing raw fear beneath his controlled exterior. "The police won't consider him missing for several more hours." "He's trying to tell us something with this drawing," Olivia insisted, pointing to musical notes flowing from the house. "Theo communicates through music now. This isn't just a family portrait." Understanding dawned in Nathaniel's eyes. "The lake house. Evelyn composed there. We haven't opened it since—" "Where is it?" Olivia was already moving toward the door. "A mile through the woods. There's a trail, but in this storm, we need to go, now." Olivia grabbed raincoats from the hall closet, tossing one to Nathaniel. "He's scared of thunder. Remember last month's storm?" Victoria appeared in the doorway, her perfect composure cracking. "Where are you going? The police said to wait here." "We think Theodore's at the lake house," Nathaniel explained, already shrugging into the raincoat. "The lake house?" Victoria's face paled. "Why would he go there? That place has been closed for years." "Because it's where his mother was happiest," Olivia said quietly. "And right now, he needs that connection." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "And how would you know what my daughter felt? You're nothing but a temporary employee who's overstepped her boundaries." "That's enough, Victoria." Nathaniel's voice cut through the tension with unexpected authority. "Olivia understands Theodore in ways I've failed to. If she believes he's at the lake house, that's where I'm looking." The use of her first name wasn't lost on either woman. Victoria stepped back, momentarily speechless, as Nathaniel grabbed flashlights from a drawer. "I'm coming with you," Olivia insisted when he tried to hand her a separate flashlight. "It's dangerous in this storm," he argued. "The path will be muddy, possibly flooded in sections." "All the more reason Theo shouldn't be out there alone." Olivia zipped her raincoat with finality. "He trusts me, Nathaniel. If he's frightened, he might. Respond better to me." The deliberate use of his first name, crossing the boundary she'd carefully maintained, hung between them for a charged moment before he nodded. They set out into the deluge, flashlight beams cutting weak paths through the darkness. The forest path, normally serene and well-maintained, had transformed into a treacherous obstacle course of fallen branches and slick mud. Twice Olivia stumbled, and twice Nathaniel's hand shot out to steady her, his grip lingering a moment longer each time. "Why the lake house?" Olivia shouted over the storm, struggling to keep pace with his longer strides. "What made it special for Evelyn?" Nathaniel ducked beneath a low-hanging branch. "I built it for her as a wedding present. It has perfect acoustics. She said it was where the music found her most easily." His voice softened despite the surrounding chaos. Theodore was conceived there. Sometimes I think he remembers things from before he was even born. The music, the lake sounds. Evelyn played for him every day during her pregnancy. The path curved, and suddenly the lake was visible through the trees, its surface violent with rain. On the far shore stood a small structure that somehow managed to appear both modern and timeless, glass and stone melding with the natural landscape. "There's light inside," Nathaniel said, relief and confusion mingling in his voice. "The power should be disconnected." They hurried around the lake's perimeter, fighting against mud that sucked at their boots. As they approached, piano notes drifted through the storm. Halting, childish playing of the C major scale Olivia had taught Theo. Nathaniel froze. "That's impossible. The piano was covered, the house locked." "He's resourceful," Olivia reminded, pulling him forward. "And determined." The lake house door was indeed unlocked, its interior illuminated by emergency battery lights that cast long shadows across dust-covered furniture. They found Theo in the main room, seated at a white baby grand piano, his small form hunched over the keys as he methodically played the scale again and again. "Theo," Olivia called softly. The boy's head snapped up, his face tear-streaked, but resolute. Instead of fear or guilt, his expression held a strange determination as he pointed insistently at the piano, then at his father. Nathaniel stepped forward uncertainly. "Theodore, you frightened us terribly. What were you thinking coming out in this storm?" Theo's response was to open the piano bench, pulling out a leather-bound book Olivia recognized immediately as a composition notebook. He thrust it toward his father with such urgency that Nathaniel had no choice but to take it. "Evelyn's compositions," he whispered, his fingers trembling as he opened the cover. Inside, page after page of handwritten music testified to a creative life cut short. But what caught Olivia's attention was the final entry, dated just days before Evelyn's death, titled, "For Theodore, on Becoming." "He wanted you to find this," Olivia realized, watching Theo's face. "He knew it was here all along." Nathaniel sank onto the piano bench beside his son, stunned. "You remembered this place? You remembered the music?" Theo nodded vigorously, then pointed at the composition title before touching his own chest and then his father's. "I think he's saying it's for both of you," Olivia translated. "A gift from Evelyn that he wanted to share." Lightning flashed, illuminating, the three of them in stark relief, the silent boy, the grieving widower, and the woman who had somehow bridged the chasm between them. In that moment of blinding clarity, something shifted in Nathaniel's face. He placed the composition on the piano stand and, with visible effort, positioned his hands over the keys. "I haven't played since college," he murmured. "Evelyn was the musician, not me." "Try," Olivia encouraged, moving to sit on Theo's other side. "For him." Hesitantly, Nathaniel began to play his late wife's final composition. The melody was simple, yet profound. A lullaby that evolved into something more complex, like a child growing into his own person. Despite his rustiness, Nathaniel captured its essence, his body gradually relaxing into the music. Halfway through, Theo placed his small hands beside his father's, adding a simple accompaniment Olivia had taught him. The synchronicity of their movements, father and son playing together, created a moment so tender that Olivia had to look away, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. When the piece concluded, silence fell, broken only by the gradually subsiding storm outside. Theo turned to his father with an expectant gaze. "Thank you," Nathaniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For bringing me back here, for remembering." And then, miraculous as a flower pushing through winter soil, Theo spoke his first words in 3 years. "Mom would like Olivia." The simple sentence, delivered in a voice raspy from disuse, caused both adults to freeze in astonishment. Theo continued, each word deliberate and precious. She makes music live again, like Mom wanted. Nathaniel pulled his son into a fierce embrace, tears flowing freely now. Over Theo's shoulder, his eyes met Olivia's, filled with gratitude, wonder, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. They waited out the storm in the lake house, Theo eventually falling asleep on a dusty sofa, while Nathaniel and Olivia sat beside him, the composition notebook open between them. "I never knew about this piece," Nathaniel confessed, tracing Evelyn's handwriting. "She must have been working on it secretly." "A final gift," Olivia murmured. She knew how important music would be for him. "For both of us," Nathaniel corrected, his voice raw with realization. "All this time, I thought silencing the music would honor her memory when it was actually silencing her voice," Olivia finished softly. "Sometimes the people we lose leave behind pieces of themselves that we need to keep alive." Their hands rested inches apart on the notebook, neither quite daring to bridge the gap. "You've changed us," Nathaniel said finally, "in ways I never expected when I hired you." "Theo did the hard work," Olivia demurred. "He just needed someone to listen to what he wasn't saying." "And I needed someone to make me hear what I'd been afraid to," Nathaniel admitted. His hand moved tentatively toward hers, but stopped short. "Victoria was right about one thing. You aren't just an employee anymore, Olivia. And that complicates everything." The implication hung between them, that professional boundaries had blurred, that feelings had developed that neither had anticipated. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a world washed clean but fundamentally altered. As dawn broke over the lake, they gathered a still sleeping Theo and began the journey back to the main house, where Victoria waited with the police and 1,000 questions. Whatever fragile understanding had formed between them in the lake house would soon face the harsh light of reality and the disapproval of a woman determined to preserve her daughter's place in the Westbrook family. Olivia knew with bittersweet certainty that the crescendo of their shared story was approaching its peak, and what followed might be harmony or dissonance. Either way, there would be no returning to the careful distance they had maintained before the storm. New composition April sunlight streamed through the windows of Olivia's quarters as she methodically packed her belongings. 3 suitcases stood by the door, a meager summary of 9 weeks that had transformed her life. From the open window came the sound of Theo's voice, no longer silent, but still precious in its rarity, as he read aloud to Mrs. Porter in the garden. The aftermath of the storm had brought changes swifter than spring's arrival. Victoria had departed after a week of tense negotiations with Nathaniel regarding Theo's future, eventually conceding that her grandson's sudden return to speech was evidence enough that he belonged at Westbrook Estate. She'd left with frigid dignity and a parting comment to Olivia. "He'll realize eventually that you're just a chapter, not the story." Perhaps Victoria had been right. In the 3 weeks since that night at the lake house, Nathaniel had maintained a careful distance, their interactions returning to employer-employee formality despite the undercurrent of unspoken feelings between them. The only acknowledgement of their shared experience came in small gestures. Evelyn's composition notebook appearing on Olivia's desk, an invitation to join father and son for dinner rather than eating separately, Nathaniel lingering in the doorway during Theo's lessons. Now, with Theo speaking again and thriving academically, Olivia had fulfilled her contractual obligation. The prestigious Harrington Academy had offered her a music teaching position for the fall semester, an opportunity too perfect to decline. She'd given her notice 2 days ago, and Nathaniel had accepted it with a tight nod and congratulations. That didn't reach his eyes. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Porter stood in the hallway, her customary severity softened by what might have been regret. Mr. Westbrook requests your presence in the music room, she announced. Theodore is waiting as well. Olivia nodded, smoothing her simple dress. Thank you, Mrs. Porter, for everything. The older woman hesitated. You've brought life back to this house. Ms. Reed. That's not something I expected to see again. Coming from Mrs. Porter, this was the equivalent of an emotional outpouring. Olivia smiled, touched by the unexpected acknowledgement. The life was always here. It just needed permission to express itself. The music room was transformed. Gone was the museum-like preservation. In its place, a living space filled with framed photographs of Evelyn alongside new pictures of Theo at the piano. Sheet music no longer remained tucked away, but occupied. A proper stand and fresh flowers brightened the windowsill. Theo sat at the piano bench, practically vibrating with excitement. Nathaniel stood beside the instrument, uncharacteristically uncertain. You wanted to see me? Olivia asked, remaining near the doorway. We have something for you, Theo announced, patting the bench beside him. A goodbye present. Nathaniel's eyes flickered at the word goodbye, but he maintained his composed expression. Theodore has been working on this secretly during your afternoon breaks. Curious, Olivia sat beside Theo, who positioned his hands over the keys with newfound confidence. I wrote it myself, he declared proudly. Dad helped a little. What followed was simple but deeply moving, a short composition that incorporated elements of the lullaby Olivia often played on her tin whistle. Though technically imperfect, the piece carried emotional depth remarkable for an 8-year-old. Olivia felt tears gathering as Theo's small fingers drew the final notes from the instrument. That was beautiful, she whispered when he finished. The most precious gift I've ever received. Theo beamed. I called it for Ms. Olivia, who brought back the music. We had it properly notated, Nathaniel added, handing her a framed score. Theodore thought you might want it for your new classroom. The gesture, thoughtful, personal, and acknowledging her departure, brought Olivia's conflicted feelings to the surface. I'll treasure it always, she managed, tracing the title with her fingertip. Can I go show Mrs. Porter my other surprise now? Theo asked, looking to his father for permission. Nathaniel nodded. Just the kitchen, nowhere else. As Theo dashed from the room, a weighted silence descended between the adults. Nathaniel moved to the window, his profile outlined against the spring landscape. The house will be quiet again after you leave, he said finally. Not like before, Olivia replied. Theo is speaking now, singing sometimes too. Thanks to you. Nathaniel turned to face her. You accomplished in 9 weeks what specialists couldn't achieve in 3 years. Olivia shook her head. I just created space for him to find his own voice. He was ready. And I wasn't, Nathaniel admitted quietly. Until you forced me to confront what I was doing to him, to us both, by trying to preserve Evelyn in amber. He moved closer, his customary reserve cracking. The Harrington Academy is an excellent opportunity. You deserve it. It is, Olivia agreed, setting down the framed composition. The timing is perfect. Perfect, Nathaniel echoed hollowly. That's one way to describe it. Olivia studied his face, reading the conflict there. Nathaniel, why did you really call me here? To say goodbye? To ask you not to go. The words emerged with difficulty, as if pushed through years of carefully constructed barriers. I know it's selfish, unprofessional. You've rebuilt your career after losing your teaching position. Theodore is speaking again. The logical conclusion to our arrangement has arrived. And yet, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of discomposure. I find myself unable to imagine this house without you in it. Olivia's heart thundered against her ribs. As Theo's tutor? As yourself. Nathaniel took a deliberate step toward her. Victoria accused me of trying to replace Evelyn. She was wrong. No one could replace her, nor should they. She will always be Theodore's mother, a brilliant musician, my first love, another step closer. But what I've come to understand, what you helped me see, is that honoring her memory doesn't mean stopping my own life, or Theodore's. What are you saying? Olivia asked, barely breathing. I'm saying that somehow, between music lessons and midnight conversations, between stormy rescues and quiet moments of understanding, I've fallen in love with you, Olivia Reed. The declaration hung in the sunlit room, transforming it as surely as spring had transformed the dormant gardens. Not as a replacement for what I've lost, but as something entirely new. Olivia stood motionless, overwhelmed by the words she'd both hoped for and feared. There are complications, she managed finally. Professional boundaries, Theo's adjustment, Victoria's disapproval, all legitimate concerns, Nathaniel acknowledged. I'm not asking for an immediate answer. The Harrington position doesn't begin until September. Stay for the summer, not as Theodore's tutor, but as our guest. Give us time to understand what this could be, without the constraints of employer and employee. Before Olivia could respond, Theo burst back into the room carrying a slightly lopsided cake decorated with musical notes and colorful frosting. "Surprise!" he announced proudly. "Mrs. Porter helped me bake it. It's a please don't go cake." Olivia laughed despite herself, taking in the earnest faces of father and son, so different from the frozen pair she'd met in January. "That's quite a persuasive cake," she said, kneeling to examine Theo's creation. "Did you know about your father's proposal?" Theo nodded solemnly. "It was my idea. Dad was being too slow." Nathaniel smiled ruefully. "Out of the mouths of babes. We could visit the lake house more," Theo continued enthusiastically. "And you could teach me more piano, and maybe in the fall I could go to regular school, and you could teach there instead of Harrington." "Theodore," Nathaniel cautioned, "one step at a time." Olivia looked between them. This unexpected family that had worked its way into her heart. "The lake house visits sound wonderful," she said carefully. "As for the rest, perhaps we could discuss possibilities." Hope bloomed in Nathaniel's eyes. "Is that a yes to staying for the summer?" Instead of answering directly, Olivia moved to the piano. Her fingers found the opening notes of Evelyn's final composition, for Theodore, on Becoming. The melody filled the room, no longer a bittersweet reminder of loss, but a bridge between past and future. "Evelyn wrote this as a gift," Olivia said, softly as she played. "Not just for Theo, but for you both. Permission to continue becoming who you're meant to be." She let the final chord resonate before turning to face them. "Yes, I'll stay for the summer. Not as an employee or a guest, but as someone exploring where this path might lead." Theo whooped with delight, nearly upending his cake in his excitement. Nathaniel's face transformed with a smile that reached his eyes, a rare sight that Olivia was beginning to treasure. Later, as afternoon faded into evening, the three of them sat on the terrace overlooking gardens now vibrant with new growth. Theo had fallen asleep on a chaise longue, exhausted from excitement and cake. Nathaniel reached for Olivia's hand, intertwining their fingers with deliberate care. "Victoria left me with a warning," Olivia confessed. "She said I was just a chapter, not the story." Nathaniel considered this. Perhaps she's right in a way. What we had before, what was lost, that's one complete story. But books can have sequels, different but connected, new chapters, new stories that honor what came before while creating something uniquely their own. "A new composition," Olivia murmured, thinking of Theo's gift. "Exactly." Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently, not replacing the original but building upon its foundation. As twilight settled over the Westbrook estate, the sound of distant piano music drifted from the open windows of the house, recordings of Evelyn's performances that Nathaniel had finally unearthed from storage. The melody mingled with the evening, birdsong and the soft breathing of the sleeping child beside them, creating a harmony of past and present, of what was lost and what might yet be found. In that moment, Olivia understood that love wasn't about filling empty spaces left by those who had departed. It was about creating new spaces alongside the existing ones, expanding the heart's capacity rather than replacing its contents. Whatever uncertainties the future held, this truth would remain their guiding principle, that it was possible to honor what had been while embracing what could be. The music room that had once stood silent now resonated with three distinct voices: Evelyn's legacy, Theo's emerging talent, and Olivia's gentle guidance. No longer discordant notes, but a symphony, still in the process of being written. Their new composition had begun,